بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, we will continue from where we left off yesterday, talking about the virtue and the importance and the necessity of acquiring knowledge, and what Imam Al-Haddad mentioned about having a beneficial wird in terms of reciting or reading beneficial knowledge. That knowledge which is beneficial knowledge is that knowledge which is increases your ma'rifah of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala and His sayings and His attributes and His actions and His endowments and favors upon you. If you were to enumerate the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can never count them. So the first of the knowledge that we should study is the knowledge of at-tawheed, the knowledge which relates to the soundness of one's religious convictions. And unfortunately, in our time, this is the science which people misunderstand the most. Subhanallah. The first science that we need to learn, and where we need to put the most attention, is the science that is mostly neglected and misunderstood. So it is an area that we need to put a lot of energy in correcting the convictions of people so it complies with what Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala revealed and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam conveyed. Inshallah, let us continue. Bismillah. Fatiha to the soul of Imam Al-Haddad radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Al-Fatiha. And I want to say something quickly before I go on. When I speak about these issues, there's always context to it. So this may not be the case in every place with every people. It is our common experience that we see this, from which we speak.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, it was collected by the Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, in his highly valuable books. Those who have religious perspicacity are well steeped in knowledge and have complete certitude, have great esteem for his books. If you wish to travel the path and arrive at the levels of realization, you must make it a habit to read them. The Ghazali books are unique among the writings of correct Sufis in that they are comprehensive, explicit, and greatly effective within a short time.
Here, Imam Al-Haddad gives us some advice. And I don't think we take this advice as seriously as we should. That he mentioned that this knowledge, the knowledge about Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, His sayings and His attributes and His actions and His endowments and the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His prohibitions and that which would give us zuhud in the dunya, abstinence in the dunya, and a strong desire to travel the path of the hereafter, and would show us the deficiencies and defects of our egos, and the pitfalls in our actions, and the plots of our enemy as shaitan. All of that knowledge is what we need to do two things. Number one, to save ourselves from everlasting punishment in the hereafter. And number two, to earn salvation, everlasting happiness in the hereafter. That's the ultimate end for all of us that we're striving for. As one of my fellow brother imams, he said that I will never forget, man, we're just trying to go to heaven now. What he meant is we're trying to make it to Jannah. That's it. All this other stuff, we got it, but man, we just trying to go to heaven now. MashaAllah. So, with that being said, all that knowledge that we need, the beneficial knowledge to do those things, is spread out in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning the books of Hadith, and in the books of the great Imams of the religion. So you're going to have Allah's words, the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the words of those great Imams who follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in excellence. To find all that knowledge we need to travel the path to Jannah, to travel the path to the hereafter, to avoid the hellfire, is going to be found in those books. So we need to have an abundant reading of those books. So abundant reading of the Quran, abundant reading of the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and abundant reading of the books of the great Imams of this ummah. And all of that was gathered, and we can say summarized, in the books of Imam Al-Ghazali. And that is the great Imam Abu Hamid, Muhammad ibn Muhammad Al-Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam, who died in the year 505 after Hijrah. Imam Al-Ghazali summarized the Quran and the Sunnah in his books. And among those books is his most famous book, his major work, Ihya Ulumuddin, which is the 4 in our 3453 code. It is the 4, which he divided that book into 4 quarters, each quarter having 10 chapters. So the entire book is 40 chapters. The quarter of Ibadat, which is acts of worship. The quarter of Adat, which is customary practices. The quarter of Al-Muhlikat, which is ruinous characteristics. And the quarter of Al-Munjiyat, which is saving characteristics. This book should be a book that we study daily. Every day, we have a portion of reading in the Ihya. The ascendants of Imam Al-Haddad, his forefathers, his Salaf, they had a habit that every day they would read a chapter of the Ihya Ulumuddin of Imam Al-Ghazali, so that every 40 days they would complete the entire book and start over again. We need to develop that, even if it is in a summarized way, where we read a muqtasar of the Ihya, which is much smaller, and we read a chapter, and try our best to become familiar with the knowledge, which is beneficial knowledge, that would lead us to success in this world and the hereafter. Now,
you must read extensively in books of hadith and tafsir, Quranic commentary, and those of the people in general. For this
the people, Kutub al-Qawm, are the books of the Sufis. Here, one of the biggest fallacies that have been told to us is that Sufism is wrong, or Sufism is bid'ah, or Sufism is something new. Sufism is the soul of Islam. And the one who leaves out Sufism, Tasawwuf, and its beliefs and practices, which are based on the Quran and the Sunnah, that person has taken the soul out of their religion. So they are just a body with no real life. And the greatest of the scholars of this nation, whose works in every Islamic science are relied upon, were Sufis. And this is a fact that cannot be denied. And when we take out the people of Tasawwuf and the science of Tasawwuf, we're working on the destruction of our religion. There is no chain on the face of the earth in any science except that that chain is filled with the people of Tasawwuf, with Sufis. You will not find a chain of narration, which is the basis for us verifying this authenticity of Islamic knowledge. You will not find one chain in any Islamic science, whether it is the sciences of the Quran or Hadith or Aqidah or Fiqh or Usul al-Fiqh or Arabic language or history or Sirah. Any science you want to name, the majority of the chains of the people in those chains are Sufis. No doubt about it. So if you take out the Sufis, you take out our connection of our religion. Beware of this. So Imam Al-Haddad, he said, you must have abundant reading in the books of the people, because in that is a general opening and a complete traveling, as some of the Arifin, the knowers of Allah, mentioned. Now,
For this is where a comprehensive opening and perfect traveling are to be found, as a Gnostic once said. However, you must be wary of whatever their treatises include by way of obscure matters and bare realities. These are present in most of the writings of Sheikh Muhi ad-Din ibn Arabi, rahimahullah, and a few of the Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, treatises, such as Al-Mi'raj, the Ascent, and Matnun Bihi, the withheld.
Here, Imam Al-Haddad gives us a warning. When we're talking about Tasawwuf, we're talking about what can be called at-Tasawwuf al-Amali. At-Tasawwuf al-Amali. Let me put that up. What that means is a practical Tasawwuf, an operational Tasawwuf, a Tasawwuf that you do, not just talking about spiritual experiences. Because some of the people of Tasawwuf, those high-ranking scholars like Ibn Arabi and others, their works contain both practical spirituality and also experiential spirituality. So you can call that, if you like, a tasawwuf al-dhawqi, right? If you want to use a term. It is an experiential tasawwuf. A tasawwuf. And they're not the same. Practicing something is not necessarily the same as experiencing it. So you may pray every day, and you have to, but you may never taste the real sweetness and intimacy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is contained in the prayer. But you still pray. But some people, when they pray, it is a spiritual ascension. It is a mi'raj for them. Some of us, we're bound to the earth, and that's where we at. But the sacred law demands of us to pray, despite we don't feel this great joy, maybe, in the prayer. Some people do. One of the Salaf, he enjoyed prayer so much that he asked Allah to grant him prayer in his grave. So there's something different. He asked Allah to grant him prayer in his grave, where there is no taklif in the grave. There's no responsibility to pray, but the joy was there, right? So while we don't deny those experiences of the people of Allah, but some of those experiences are not suitable to be understood by people who don't have those experiences, who didn't share in those experiences. And they cannot be described to someone who didn't experience it. If you try to describe, maybe it will seem like heresy, because it's something that has to be experienced. It is like telling someone who's never been in love what it feels like to truly be in love. You can't describe that. If someone has truly been in love, it is hard to describe it to someone who's never experienced true love. The one who's never become one with a person will never be able to understand someone who's become one with someone. It becomes like the Majnun in Layla. Whatever she feels, I feel. Whatever I feel, she feels. That's a level. But most people, they're in a relationship. They have nothing to do with love. But they're still in a relationship. They're still married. But they didn't experience that. So, as given us some form of practical analogy, that spiritual experience of the people of Allah, because you don't experience, doesn't mean it's not real. And it may seem far-fetched to you. So with those experiences, we have to be careful, so the one who didn't experience it may claim it and thereby go astray, or misunderstand it and thereby go astray. So there's the warning there.
Sheikh Zarruq, rahimahullah, gave in his...
You have a footnote there? No.
I do, but the footnotes, not for that one, for the word people.
Sheikh Ahmad Zarruq is a great Maliki scholar from Morocco. And he was one of the great Shadhili masters of the Shadhili way, because the Ba'alawi way, which is the way of Imam Al-Haddad, outwardly is the way of Al-Ghazali, and inwardly is the way of the Shadhiliya, or the followers of Abul Hasan al-Shadhili. So Ahmad Zarruq was one of the masters of that way at the end of the 9th century. He was a student of Al-Hafiz al-Sakhawi, the student of Amir al-Mu'mineen Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and others. And he wrote one of the most famous books in the science of Tasawwuf. It's called Al-Qawaid. It's the Qawaid of Az-Zaruq. And in that, he gives many, 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 many definitions of at-tasawwuf and its practices. So he's an authority in that. He has multiple commentaries on the hikam of Ibn Ata'illah al-Sakandari, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Naam.
Sheikh Zarruq rahimahullah gave in his Ta'sis al-Qawa'id, the rules, a warning about such books, read it if you wish, but did not mention the writings of Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Jili rahimahullah, for he was a latecomer. However, all of his writings should, for the sake of safety, be avoided.
And if you read his books, which I've read, they are contain many, many spiritual mysteries that the likes of us should not even try to approach. These people speak from experience, and if you don't have that experience, you'll totally misunderstand. You may fall into ilhad, right? To leave religion altogether, thinking that you become one with God, which is kufr. But that was not their case. But they're speaking of divine spiritual realities and trying to express them in words. And that's why you would find Imam Al-Ghazali mentioning that there are certain points he would be talking. He said, this is where the pen stops. Meaning it's not permissible to talk about other than this. Allahu Akbar. Naam, go ahead.
Should it be said, there is no harm in reading such books, for I take that which I understand and leave alone that which I do not. I would say you speak fairly. However, what we fear for you is that that which you think you understand incorrectly, and thereby diverge from the straight path.
And this happens to many people. They think they understand, but they don't. And once they start explaining, you see that they don't understand. So be careful, because, and I see many people, especially in Tasawwuf in English, because a lot of the books in English are written by Orientalists, which are non-Muslims who write about Islam and Eastern spirituality, and they misunderstand altogether. And one would read that and become kafir, would blaspheme by reading those books if one understood from them what they try to convey. You have all kinds of blasphemous ideas that are contained in those books and attributed to the people of Tasawwuf, which they are free from.
As has happened to some who were assiduous readers of those books and ended up in heresy and unbelief and talked about incarnation, hulul, and union, ittihad.
Incarnation is to believe, or al-hulul, that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala wal-iyadu billah dwells in his creation. And al-ittihad is when one thinks that they become one with Allah. So they become Allah. This is kufr. Both of these concepts, al-hulul wal-ittihad, are both blasphemous convictions, which the people of Tasawwuf are free from them. As Imam Al-Junaid, he said, التوحيد إفراد القديم من المحدث. That divine oneness is to distinguish the one who has no beginning from that which is a created event. Sallallahu. Go ahead.
There is neither ability nor power save by Allah Ta'ala, the High, the Formidable.
Barakallahu biki. May Allah reward you. Let's keep the reader in our dua for all of her effort in assisting us in our learning of this religion and reading these books. She makes it so easy for all of us. Maybe if we had to read all of these books and all of these things that she's done with us over these years, we wouldn't have done it. So may Allah reward her and her family with the best reward that students have ever asked for their teachers. And as a reader, she is serving as a part of our teachers. May Allah increase her rank. I wanted to discuss a few things in regard to what we discussed yesterday. We were talking about the creed, about the attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And just to repeat, we mentioned 3 principles, the how we should approach the attributes of Allah, which are the safest way to approach the attributes of Allah. Quickly, could everyone remind me of those 3 points that we made? Uh-oh. I want to make sure you're learning. I just don't want to talk. I want to make sure we're learning. Or if we're not learning, my talk is worthless. So don't make my talk worthless. I got better things to do, right? If it's not a benefit. So come on, let me see what you got. Who can remind me of those 3 points that I mentioned in terms of approaching the attributes of Allah in our understanding? Here comes the excuse. Everybody's driving now. Okay, driving. I'm driving. But you can type while you're driving. If you can type 1 word, you can type 10, right? Come on, give me the 3. I'll wait. Where's Isa? Where's Malika? No one wrote them down? Okay, we cannot encompass the reality of Allah. Good. Okay. That the attributes of Allah, the Quran and Hadith, are in Arabic. So whenever an attribute is mentioned, the attribute is what is contained in the Arabic language. Once you translate it, it is no longer the attribute of Allah. Right? That's good. Now the third part. So we affirm all the attributes that Allah attributed to himself in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ adds about the Hadith. Right? And one last point. It's about the understanding. We believe in them as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger intended them. That's very important. So we cannot encompass the reality of Allah. The attributes that are mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith, which is in Arabic, we affirm them as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger intended them. Right? I want to say something. And we must be fair. Many of the people who want to learn about Islam have not had the opportunity to learn properly, especially in our environments in the West. Therefore, they may, and oftentimes do, misunderstand important foundational creedal concepts. They don't understand. And some of us have been Muslim for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years and still don't understand. Not because they're unintelligent, but because they've never been taught properly. So don't feel that because you don't understand some things or some concepts are new to you, that is an insult of your intelligence. Rather, look at it as it really is you're being exposed to something you never knew. So no matter how intelligent you are, if you don't have access, you're not going to know, period. You could be the smartest person in the world, but you don't have access to it, so you don't know. The key for us is to learn to admit when we don't know. That's really challenging for us because it goes to the heart of the ego, right? To the heart of the ego, to the very core of the ego. What I mean by to the heart of the ego, to the core aspect of the ego. To say I don't know sometimes is very hard for us. And that is the key to us learning, admitting that we don't know. That's one aspect. So many of us, all of us, should consider ourselves beginners. All of us. If you keep that habit, or thought rather, that I'm a beginner, you're never going to have that feeling. The minute you start thinking you advanced, it's going to be difficult for you to advance. Let's put that up. The minute you start thinking that you are advanced, it's going to be difficult for you to advance. I would say extremely difficult, if not almost impossible. The minute you start thinking that you are advanced, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to advance. And I would add almost impossible. Don't be like that. No matter how much you learn, consider yourself a beginning for the knowledge that's going to come. So even if you mastered some things, the level you reached, there's more of higher levels of knowledge that you haven't reached. So you're always a beginning. I'll tell you what the great scholar Abdurrahman bin Abdullah Bal-Faqih, who was a student of Imam Al-Haddad, he said something to give us this understanding. You know, number 3 in our 3453 code stands for what? Number 3, the first 3. So we have our 3453 code. What does the first 3 stand for? The first 3. What does it stand for? And the Hadith Jibril mentions 3 main items. What are they? So what are the 3 things, main 3 things mentioned in the Hadith of Jibril? Allah. Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Right? So we have Islam, Al-Islam, Al-Iman, and Al-Ihsan. Islam first. Al-Islam, Al-Iman, and Al-Ihsan. Al-Habib Abdul Rahman bin Abdullah al-Faqih radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, the end of Al-Islam, it's its starting point, right? He said the end of Islam, Maqam al-Islam, the station of Islam, is the beginning of Maqam al-Iman, the station of Iman. The end of the station of Iman is the beginning of the station of Al-Ihsan. The end of the station of Al-Ihsan is the beginning of the station of Al-Irfan. And the end of the station of Al-Irfan is the beginning of further higher stations. In other words, at every station of learning and degree of learning, the end of that station is the beginning of another station. So we haven't even completed the station of Al-Islam yet, right? So we're beginners. Even if we appear knowledgeable, we're beginners. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So for us, keep that in mind, right? And this will help us in our learning. Every day you learn, you're going to discover matters and knowledge that you didn't know before. And if you critically think through every piece of information and knowledge that you acquire, you're going to have a much more mature understanding the more you read or study the same knowledge. So every time you learn and you study, you're going to get new knowledge. Even if you repeat the same knowledge, by repetition, you're going to get a more mature understanding of that knowledge. So that's going to be an increase of knowledge. Do y'all follow me? That's very important to understand. I'm talking about in our seeking of knowledge, our traveling the path of knowledge. This is extremely important to understand. And all of that requires patience. And all of that is in stages. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to go from step to step to step to step. If you skip steps, you will go back to the first step. If you skip steps, you'll go back to the first step. It's very important to understand this. So, since that's the case, make this a rule. Never be too proud to admit you were mistaken. Can we put that up? Never, with capital letters, be too proud to admit that you were mistaken. Never be too proud to admit that you were mistaken. It's the natural process of learning to be mistaken. If you're never mistaken, you're not learning. Because the more you learn, you're going to discover your mistakes. If you have this approach, you're going to continue to grow. You're going to grow. You're going to grow. You're going to learn. You're going to mature in your Islam. You're going to acquire. You're going to, because you're not going to be stagnated by your own ego. You're not going to be stagnated by your own ego. It's very important. The ego is tricky, so you have to watch. Another point, these are a few advices I'm giving because I'm talking to myself as well, because I'm doing a project right now that is extremely difficult for me. I have to apply all these things to do what I'm doing. And it's a necessary project for all of us that I'm doing. It will be a benefit for all of us. But it's very difficult for me because it involves applying all these things I'm telling you about. So I'm talking to myself first and foremost, but I'm sharing the idea with you so that it's easier for you to do what you need to do for your growth and development. Fairness has left the building, as they say, in our religious discourse. Fairness has left the building. And sometimes, because we don't want to be wrong, we don't be fair. Quite often. Because we don't want to admit we were wrong or mistaken, we don't be fair when dealing with others, when dealing with that which opposes our position. Because we don't want to admit we were mistaken or wrong, we can't be fair. And that hinders us from learning and acquiring truth. And sometimes the truth is bitter and against you. Sometimes the truth is bitter and it is against you. Despite that fact, you still have to accept it. So critical thinking becomes extremely important in this case, because the ego, the nafs, is going to push you away to protect itself. You have to critically think your way past the tricks of your nafs and the tricks of the devil. When our seeking of knowledge and our discourse between one another contains these elements, we're going to move together as a people, as a community. So it's very important, right, that we develop these things. And lastly, among these points, before I just go on to something else that I want to talk about quickly, make it your lifetime mission to discover the truth, no matter where it comes from. Make it your lifetime mission to discover the truth, no matter where it comes from. Make it your lifetime mission to discover the truth, no matter where it comes from. Now, let me move to the point. For us, this is specifically for African American Muslims, for Black Muslims in the United States of America, specifically. It may include all common Muslims and students of knowledge around the world. But specifically, I'm directly addressing African American Muslims at all levels. All right, y'all got this? Please follow me. I'm specifically addressing African American, Black Muslims in America at all levels. But what I'm going to say may include, and practically does include, everybody around the world at some degree or some level. But I'm specifically talking to a group of people. So keep context. I gave you the context, right? African American Muslims, Black Muslims, whatever other description you want to use for the people that was raised, born here in America of African descent, that were former descendants of former slaves. Whatever description you want to use, we got a million descriptions. You know who I'm talking about, you, right? We have been the subject of propaganda in the name of Islam our whole journey in trying to return to our Islamic roots. I'm going to say that again, talking to us, people who come from our background, our reality. We have been the subject of propaganda and political agendas in the name of Islam the entire time we have been trying to return to our Islamic roots. Can somebody put that up? Because I may change the wording, but the wording I want to stick to our minds. We, African American Muslims, Black Muslims, whatever you want to use, have been the subject of propaganda and political what is the word I use for that? A political agenda, our entire journey in returning to our Islamic roots. So propaganda, political agenda in the name of Islam. Right. Can you do me a favor, redo this quickly? I know your hands hurt, but it'll help. After agendas, put in the name of Islam. So African American Muslims have been the subject of propaganda and political agendas in the name of Islam the entire time that we've tried to return to our Islamic roots. But this is good. Let me ask you a question. How many of you noticed this to be a fact? I'm talking to us. And you can explain how. That's a question. There's a lot of y'all here. So I'm assuming a vast majority of you are African American. That's an assumption. I have no way of knowing. But what I see is a lot. How many of you agree with that and could explain it and articulate it well, that statement? Number one, how many of you, first of all, how many of you agree with it? That's number one. Just put one if you can, or I can. Just put I can. I want to know how many of you, or I agree. That's better. I agree. How many of you agree first? Let's go to the first one. So I'm ready. I agree. Please, everyone participate who can type. I agree with what I just said. I want to take a poll. I engage you. I need you to engage me. I'm trying to do something. I need your help. Okay. I need you to keep going. I want to match the number of people in here. So even if you're not African American, you can still answer if you agree. Or if you don't agree, just say I don't agree. But I'm trying to take a poll. I like this. When the people who listen to me and act like they're not listening to me, this is the time they be like, man, should I say something? I want to, but I don't want them to know I'm listening. You listening. I don't care if your boss don't want you to listen. You still listening, right? You ain't listening to him, so just join in. Don't worry about it. He doesn't own you hereafter. Do your thing. Jump in. It's Martin Luther King Day. Black man should be free to speak and think. Come on, guys. Don't be afraid. Okay. I'm saying that because I want others as well to look at the sentiment of our people. Muslims, we Muslims. Look how we feel. I am sticking to the program. My program is starting trouble. Right? You didn't notice that yet? You've been here for 4 years. You've been in the match chair with me for years. You don't realize I'm always starting, right? I'm beginning to question your intelligence, brother. No, I'm joking. No. All right, I'm just having fun with Muti. That's my buddy. I love him so much. He don't know how much I love him. Allah. Okay. Now, I'm getting ready to say something that's going to probably shock some of you. You're used to me talking about the Wahhabis to the point they renamed the Black Imams Round Table to Awkan. I love that name. It's so funny. Anti-Wahhabi Coalition of Negroes. That's classic. That one was good. I don't know about to y'all, but to me, I was like, man, that's some serious critical thinking. So you're used to me doing that. But I do that because of this, in addition to seeking the truth. But this is one easy one. But to be fair, even in the name of Ahl Sunnah, this has been played on our people. So it's clear, because I express it all the time, from the side of the Wahhabis and the Saudi government and their mission and how it has affected our communities and broke our families up. Yes, that's undeniable. If you be fair, that's undeniable, right? And it has had the biggest recent impact on us, but it wasn't the only impact. So even as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Ash'ari, Maturidi, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Tasawwuf, this game has been played on us by foreign agents, meaning those who are not from our own people. This has been played on us to use us in the name of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah for their agenda. Both the Wahhabiyya did that, and so have some people did it in the name of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. No matter which way you turn, we as African Americans have always been the subject of someone's religious propaganda and political agenda. And we've been used to further that. And we've always end up on the short end of the stick while someone else has grew off of our backs. This has to stop. And I can articulate it. I would hurt a lot of feelings, but I can articulate it with ease, right? This is a reality, and I lived it, so I know. I know it inside and out. I can articulate it with my eyes closed. And for us, if we're ever going to find the truth, we have to break the shackles of other people's religious propaganda and political agendas. We have to break those shackles that's been put on our minds. Because of those religious propaganda and those political agendas, in the name of Islam, we've shackled our brains and we no longer think for ourselves. Rather, we think with the mind of our oppressor. And this is a problem. And the oppressor sometimes happens to be Muslim. Sometimes happens to be Muslim, especially in this case that I'm talking about. So that means now when we study, we have to realize when we have information in front of us that some of this may very well be propaganda. Also, it may be a political agenda that's being directed to us through Islam, through doctrine. That's not what we want. We want Islam. We want true doctrine. You can keep your religious propaganda and your political agenda. We don't need it. We have our own if we want to use one. We don't need yours. And as Muslims, I'm talking about African Americans, we have to have enough honor and dignity to express that. We have to have enough honor and dignity to express that. Because some of us, how many of you, I'll give you an example of it. How many of you ever heard somebody say, I'm not black, I'm Muslim? How many of you heard that before? I'm not black, I'm Muslim. How many of you heard someone say that? Talking about an African American. I'm not black, I'm Muslim. And when we say black, we mean African American. You know what I mean. Religiously, is there a contradiction for being black and Muslim? That's a question. Religiously, is there a contradiction from being black and Muslim? There's a contradiction from being black and Muslim? So when I say it's a contradiction, that means because I'm Muslim, is it haram to be black? I want you to critically listen to what I just said to you. I'm Muslim, so it's unlawful for me to be black? So why do you say I'm black? I'm not black, I'm Muslim. Because if you're saying I'm not black and I'm Muslim, the assumption, the underlining thing you're saying is that it's haram to be black. If you think about it. Because if it's not haram to be black, then there's no need for the statement. You're black and you happen to be Muslim. Or you're Muslim and you happen to be black. It's the same. Now let me move one step. You all heard I'm not black, I'm Muslim. You ever heard somebody say, because black, we mean African American. That's what we mean by black. Or descendants, ex-descendants, descendants of former slaves or whatever that new term they got. You know who I'm talking about. Black Americans of African descent that were born here. That's what I'm talking about. Africans who were brought here as slaves, their ascendants, and they're descendants of those Africans who were brought here as slaves, and they were born here in America. That's who we're talking about when we say black people. Now, if you don't like the term black, that's fine, but I just want you to identify who we're talking about. That's who we're talking about. And that's who would say, I'm not black, I'm Muslim. Have you ever heard a Daisy an Arab, a Chinese, an African who wasn't born in America, born in Africa, an Egyptian, a Moroccan, an Indonesian, a Malaysian, a European, Muslims. Have you ever heard them say, I am not from my background, I'm just Muslim? Have you ever heard someone say that? You ever heard the Pakistanis say, I'm not Pakistani, I'm just Muslim? Have you ever heard a Bengali say, I'm not Bengali, I'm just Muslim? You ever heard a Palestinian and an Arab from anywhere say, I'm not Arab, I'm just Muslim? You ever heard a Chinese say, I'm not Chinese, I'm just Muslim? An Asian, I'm not Asian, I'm just Muslim. You ever heard nobody say that? Think about it. Never. So for us, we're making a mistake here. That old James Brown song, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. We need to reclaim that as Muslims. As African American Muslims, we need to reclaim that. Until we get that in our mind, it needs to be a slogan for us. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. We need to reclaim that. That's part of the political agenda of others, to strip us of our identity so that we would have no identity and be forced to emulate others and further their agenda, their culture, their ways, and we will even make it ours. And that works on a bigger scale to push their agenda across. And we're the ones who are doing it. I'm not finished. It's very important. Every nation of Muslims, because we are various nations, groups of people, has their own unique expression within Islam that is identified to them. But they are Muslim. But if you see their religious practices, you will know it came from those people, even though it's Islam, but it's expressed in their cultural context. Do you understand that? The Chinese Muslim does not look like, resemble the Arab Muslim or the Pakistani Muslim or the Indonesian Muslim or the Egyptian. The Chinese Muslim has a unique expression of their Islam. They're Muslims. They believe in the same thing as we do, but they have their own cultural expressions within the bounds of Islam. The Saudis have it, the Egyptians have it, the Pakistanis have it, the Bengalis have it, the Indians have it, the Indonesians have it, the Malaysians have it, the Africans have it, the Europeans have it. What's wrong with us having it? Everyone has it. Why can't we? Why does our expression have to be someone else's expression? And why do we pick this group over that group? These are things we should think about. It's definitely a further discussion, but I want to wake us up because we are responsible for what our tomorrow is going to look like in terms of our descendants. What we do today is very important and essential for what their Islam is going to look like tomorrow. Look at our Islam today and then do a historic review of what our predecessors did, and you'll understand why we where we at. Both the good and the bad. But whenever you want to develop, you have to look at both. You have to look at the assets and the achievements, and you have to look at the challenges and obstacles and failures. You got to look at both. You can't just look at one side. Neither way. You can't say it's all bad, and you can't say it's all good. You need to evaluate both sides and start to increase the good aspects, the achievements, and diminish and try to wipe out the challenges and the obstacles. You need to do that. And we as a people need to do that. I was listening and reading, so I was listening and reading. I'm doing a thorough research and study of the whole Wahhabi doctrine in every aspect. In every aspect. It's like a work I'm doing right now. Intensive research and study. It involves literally hundreds of hours of reading and research and study. And quite expensive. Quite expensive. But I'm thinking way down the line for my children. And every one of your children, I consider my children too. And I would hope that you feel the same way about me. So in this research, because this is our modern problem in our communities, I noticed something, and I'll share this with you. I'll share this with you. Do any of you know the Islamic term Anyone knows what that means? Do any of y'all know what that means? I could give you the plural. Any of y'all know what that means? Who knows what that means? So the plural is the other word. Any of y'all know what that means? It's up there. No one? We got a lot of people. Somebody should know what this means. Come on. No. 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 Guardian of the commands. Close, Abdullah, but no cookie. Now, this is very, it's sad. We should know it is. That's how bad a job they did on us. We have no idea. Because we used to have that, you know. Did a number on us, man. All right, I'll tell you. That means the leader. That means the leader. Or the leaders. Those who are in charge. Those in power. Waliul Amr is the leader of the nation. Those who are in charge. Right? That's the one in charge. Who's in charge of our nation? Huh? I'm talking to us, black folks. Who's in charge of our nation? You, yeah, in your dreams. Right? Stop. No, honest, seriously, joke. Who's our leader? Hmm? Said everyone else. I'm going to share something from this research. But African Americans, who's our leader? Muslims, I'm not African American Muslims. Who's our leader? Is Mohammed bin Salman our leader? He's our Waliul Amr, Mohammed bin Salman. Do y'all know who that is? Is he our leader? You sure? Yeah, for most of us, he is. You just don't know it. Do y'all know who that is? Y'all know who that is? Is he our leader? Are you sure? I know you're saying no, but are you sure? Most of us, the vast majority of us, unknowingly have allegiance to him. But it's in the name of the Quran and Sunnah. He's your leader. Seriously. In our community, as crazy as it sounds, it's an undisputable fact. Because all of our doctrines come from Saudi Arabia, and the leaders of that, the sheikhs, who are all under his leadership and have undying loyalty and allegiance to him and his family. And everything they push is to follow and obey them. And that's what's in your neighborhoods. It's a fact. If you understand politics. If you don't, then you're oblivious of facts. Nor do you know what they say, their own scholars. No matter what they talk about, they're big scholars. All of them have complete allegiance to that regime. And to them, that's a religious obligation. They don't have allegiance to you. They don't have allegiance to anyone other than them that you may have allegiance to. And since you're leaderless, you have no representation, they represent for you. And I could switch that the other way, but I'm just giving you something that we should think about. Sometimes, I told this brother, I can make this so I don't I really want to say some stuff that I just hold my tongue, because I'm so hopeful for Black people that one day we'll wake up and you can say it after the fact. Sometimes I want to say something directly to my own experience, but I just don't. Because I weigh it that I'm very, very hopeful that in time, some of my people will wake up and just discover by we doing what we're doing, not being so explicit, but they getting the point, I would hope. Because the same thing that's happened with Saudi has happened from other quarters of the world where Muslims are at, but in the name of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, but the same concept when it comes to Black people. It's a different doctrine. They're not Wahhabi, they're Sunni. But the political agenda, the Islamic propaganda is the same when it comes to Black people. No matter where you turn, someone else is representing you that doesn't have your particular interests. Do you understand that? No matter which way you turn, because you are leaderless. But they all have loyalty and leaders to their people. That doesn't include you. So therefore, you're always a subject nation to someone else's agenda. Do y'all follow this? Is this like too far in for you, too deep? Because it's important for our children. And we live it. I can articulate it. It's not hard, very easy. But somebody gonna wake us up. Somebody gotta say, hey, you sleeping at the wheel, you're gonna crash. So for instance, let's just move around quickly. In the early days of our Sunnism in America, African Americans, where were the majority of our religious knowledge coming from in the early days? Do y'all know? In the Black community, the early days, 50s, 60s, 70s, I'm talking about external, I'm not talking about the nation. I'm talking about so-called Sunni Islam. Where was most of our information and the teachers in those early days coming from? A lot of it from the subcontinent, and a lot of in the universities from Egypt, the Arab world. All of those, I said external, Khadija, not local, external, coming outside, not what we were doing ourselves, outside, in the name of Sunni Islam. So every one of those groups, they came with loyalty to a leader, loyalty to a nation state, and a culture. And they gave that to us, and we adopted that as our Islamic expression. Is this a fact or is this fiction? From experience. Now, if you didn't experience, then you don't know. I lived it, so I do know. Is this a fact or false? Let's be honest, from experience, from observation. So we were directed to someone else's agenda, someone else's propaganda in the name of Islam. Like, to be Muslim, I must adopt all of that stuff. That's the propaganda. And behind it is the political agenda, because the agenda needs propaganda for it to get through. And that's what we brought. And that became our expression of Islam, which had nothing to do with us. And hence, our loyalties were given to people who had nothing to do with us. No, this is a fact, right? I'm just talking about the reality, because I'm going to talk about solutions to this stuff too. But you already know the solution. But before we get to the solution, we need to understand the problem first. We need to really understand the problem. And in order to maintain that, it is necessary to divest you of your own agenda, your own culture, your own mindset, and to make you think through my lens, to see the world through my lens. That's important for it to work. So all of that has to be our expression. We change our clothes. We change what we listen to. We change the way we speak. All of that becomes a part of that propaganda machine, which has a political agenda to it. But it's using Islam to do it. It looks different where it's coming from. Swing it, move it to Egypt, to a certain movement that gets you on the academic level. So now you're politically active, but it's never in your communities. You're politically active in other communities because you're serving someone else's agenda of assimilation. But to you, it's presented as Islam. Move to African movements that were not African American. These are Africans. You will notice that the agenda switches to an African expression of a region and their leaders and their agenda, and you adopt that and forget your reality. It's the same you did with the Pakistanis, the same you may do with the Egyptians, you're doing it too with the Africans. But they're never working on your agenda. They're getting you to work on their agenda. It doesn't reflect you. And to this day, We've never seen the benefit of it at all. Collectively, I'm not talking about individuals. Somebody may came up. That's always happens. But collectively, we're still in the same circumstances. When we were with the subcontinent movement, when we were with the Egyptian Arab progressive movement, when we went to the African Islamic movement, when we went to the Wahhabi movement, the Saudi movement, no matter where we turn, it's the same thing. And whenever there's another rise from another area, you're going to find we're going to do the same thing. I'm telling you, us, move around. I've been around enough. I can articulate it like with ease. I have 43 years in this stuff. Man, 4 decades. If I ain't seen this 1,000 times, something's wrong with me. And I have. We'll start to just change our whole stuff. We'll never, ever develop what every other people has developed if we keep doing that. And hence, we'll never be respected, ever. We'll always be the subject and the property of someone else, which is devastating to our future. And that's why we're so quick to let someone else lead. We've been trained that we're not suitable for leadership. We don't even see ourselves as world leaders. We only see others as our leaders. Do you understand my point? It's a thought. He's black. He cannot be the leader. It's impossible. He can't even lead us, let alone lead the world. And with that thought, it will never happen. We're shot in our minds before we even get started on the journey. In our minds, we're shot. We didn't even move. The way we think is a barrier for progress and advancement for us as a people. It's a barrier itself, just the way we've been taught to think, to where we believe it. Now, let's not get too far. We've been trying to bring down white supremacy for over 400 years. And today we got a march in the community in 3 hours. And today we're still fighting the battle that was fought in the 60s. In fact, I would say it's even harder now because we're more deluded. We don't even know who our enemies are anymore. We actually think our enemies are our friends. And they have expressed their enmity towards us clearly, as clear as the sun at noon on a clear day. But we know, because they gave us some money, they gave us some videos, they let us shake our butts, they let us have jets and mansions, and we can throw money all around the place, and we actually believe we're free. We actually believe we're free. Switch. We can go on Hajj, we can go on Umrah, we could go get a free scholarship to go study. We could do all that, and we actually believe we're free. When all you're doing is being programmed. We have a serious problem. that we need to address. None of this has anything to do with anyone else. In reality, it all has to do with us. Because someone can only do what you let them do to you, especially the mind. If someone can control your mind, they don't need to control your body. They don't need to. You think like me. I don't need to physically abuse you. You abuse yourself thinking like me. We would have never thought we had to say this in Islam. We do. Others have followed the recipe and roadmap of white supremacy in relation to black people. Others have copied it. But don't forget, they studied with the white folks. That's where they got their information. They went to the same universities that we were not allowed to go. They went there and sent their children and brought all that stuff back to build their nations. They didn't build it on the Quran and the Sunnah. They just used that as windows dressing. They really have the white supremacist mentality and agenda. And they just put it inside Islamic expressions. But in relation to us, it's the same agenda. It's the same thing. And when we start looking at it like that, things will change. And that's my agenda. That's my propaganda. To make us start seeing this stuff the same way we saw white supremacy, the same way we see white supremacy. We need to start looking at this stuff the same way, because it is the same thing. It just has a different face. It got a new mask. It's the same entity with the same agenda. You want the Dalil? If it's so Islamic, you own the country, you're in charge. Why is American culture more comfortable in your country than me as a black Muslim? I don't understand that. Wait a minute. Let me repeat that. Why is American culture and all of its evils that it has, I'm not saying it doesn't have good things, but we're talking about a lot of evils, more comfortable in the Islamic country than the black Muslim? Let me say that again, just so you get it. Why is American culture and its evils, I'm not talking about just the good, because it got good stuff. There ain't nobody taking that part. The evil stuff is more comfortable in the Islamic countries than the black American Muslim is. Explain that. In your countries, the black American Muslim may feel uncomfortable sometimes, quite often, especially if they try to assert themselves. But the Western Kufa culture is extremely comfortable and comes as it is, and it's accepted. You don't see a problem with that? You don't see a problem with that? It's so acceptable that now the Islamic lands, including the sacred lands, which the Prophet ﷺ fought to remove kufr, is the attraction for kufr. You don't think this by design? It is the attraction for kufr. Kuffar are getting themselves together to go to the sacred lands to do kufr. Think about that. You don't think this is by design? You don't think this by design? I mean, it's just something to think about. But at the same time, while that's happening, they're feeding us our religion. That's where we get our religion from. The same people who's doing that. There are religious teachers. And we talking about we love Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, who told us only a fool will let their enemy teach them. Only a fool would do that. I just want you to think about stuff. This is serious stuff. And we so poor, not only in money, in our thinking, that we think that we have to settle for that type of stuff for us to come up. We have a lot of work to do as a people. And these books that I'm studying, books of Imam Al-Haddad and Al-Ghazali and all that, you know why I study those books and talk about them with y'all? Because these people showed how to start little and to develop a nation and to develop power. They did it. And we need to emulate that for ourselves. They did it. They escaped oppression. They built generations of pious, upright people, and they became leaders. It took 1,000 years or more, but hey, they established something for their future. It took 1,000 years, 500, 600, 700 years. But in terms of history, 1,000 years is nothing. It's like a moment. So I just wanted to share this thought with you, and I'm going to bring it to a close because we have a lot of work to do. But the first stage of all the work is to realize that we have work to do. As that old saying goes, I freed, I don't know the number, 1,000 slaves, and I would have freed much more if they knew they were slaves. I freed 1,000 slaves, but I would have freed many more if they knew they were slaves. That's where we at. That's why we struggle to say who's our leader, because we slaves mentally. The religious propaganda and the political agenda has overwhelmed our thought pattern from others, and they keep switching it so we never adjust because we're getting hit with a different one every time. Every time we think we caught on, boom, they switch the game, put us another, and we keep going through the same cycle over and over again. And this ain't racism. Islam came to remove such situations and realities. Islam came to remove it, but we ain't practicing Islam. Islam came to remove so that I wouldn't even be able to say these things. And we all know it's true. Islam came to remove that. So yes, we need to learn our religion, Because learning our religion is going to free us. We need to learn the deen. Because the deen of Islam will free us. But we have to learn the deen of Islam, not his interpretation, not his interpretation, and not his interpretation as just his interpretation. If his interpretation happens to coincide with Islam, then we accept. But we have to have critical thinking skills to distinguish between his understanding and Islam. That's our challenge. That's the challenge. That's our challenge. To distinguish between Islam and his understanding, to ensure that his understanding, whoever his may be, is coinciding with Islam. And it's not become his understanding is Islam, and we're just following his understanding, not Islam. And that's what has happened. Someone's understanding of the deen has become the deen to us, because we don't have critical thinking skills or enough knowledge to distinguish, like, wait. That's your understanding. This is Islam. And your understanding doesn't coincide with Islam. And then you got to have the courage to say that and to act upon it. But if you're already programmed, you almost feel there's a crime to think for yourself. I cannot think outside of my subjugator's thought pattern. I have to see it through his eyes. I've been trained to believe that to use my own eyes and critical thinking is a crime. But he can use his, but I cannot use mine. It's fine for everyone else to use their skills, but you dare not use yours. And when you start to use yours, you'll realize that this guy not that smart. When you start to use your skills, you'll realize that the one you've been subjugating your bright mind to is not that smart, not that intelligent at all. But he's convinced you that you're stupid. So you follow suit. And really, he's the stupid one. You're far smarter than him, far more capable of leading than him. But he's convinced you that you're not capable, and you brought it. So therefore, you don't even challenge his false acquiring of leadership. It's false. You're not even qualified. Let me tell you something. You know what I do? It's weird, but it works for me. Maybe you don't have this experience. I put myself in the penitentiary all the time in my mind when I deal with people. This is me. If you don't have this experience, you can't do it. In the penitentiary is every man for themselves. Survival of the fittest. I'm talking about if you've been in the places I've been in. Survival of the fittest. Sink or swim, period. Ain't nobody helping you. That's how this go down. And in that environment, I look at each man to man, every man, no matter who you're dealing with. We all men. We all men. We all in the same situation. I don't care who you was. I don't care what you got. In here, we all men. One on one. That's it. That's how we rolling. And I think with every man, if this man was in that situation, would I subjugate myself to him? The answer is no. So that means we're all on the equal playing field. Now, in that condition, as men, we're going to ascend by our natural talents and skills in an environment of survival of the fittest. That's it. Some make it, some don't. Some just get through, some lead the way. That's men, right? So if I look, when I'm dealing with someone, I'm like, how would he survive in that environment? Maybe he would be in protective custody. Maybe this dude would join a group just so he don't get raped or get his property taken or his commissary taken or be treated like a coward. That's how I look at people, seriously. I know it's weird. That's how I look at men. I always think, if you was in that circumstances, what kind of man would you be? That's how I want to weigh them. When I deal with you, that's how I'm looking at you. I'm talking about in terms of what kind of dude you are. So I'm not going to put myself and subjugate myself to someone I know couldn't even survive in a real environment of survival of the fittest. I'm not going to do that. Right? I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. Now, I'm just telling you a mindset that's needed for us to build our own nation and become our own leaders. We can't look at other people as if they're superior to us. In no way. It's all equal. Your natural talents, my natural talents. Let's see what we got. Right? I'll give you an example. Want me move it? How many of you, if you ain't scared, you don't got some other agenda, how many of you been to prison? Just say I. I'm gonna show you something. How many of you been in the prison in the United States? Say I. I say I. I'm not afraid. I've been to prison for a long time. I. Go ahead. Let me see how many I's. Come on, all you guys. Stop lying. Come. This is a Black experience, unfortunately. Sometimes you need to tell your business if we're going to build. Some people need your experience to survive. Prison, not county jail. Prison. Even county jail for this purpose. Don't be free. Hey, listen. As Malcolm said, you all in prison. America is a prison. What you talking about? Don't look at me strange. You all in prison. America is a prison. You ain't realized that yet? Okay, here's my point. All of you who have experienced prison, county jail, and there's Muslim communities, how many times have you seen in the prison that the imam or the leaders, the majority of them, are not Black? The imam, the emir, the leaders are not Black. How many of you have seen that? At the majority of the places you've been. Because usually if you've been to prison, you've been to more than one place. That are not Black. Abdul Batin says never. Black. Come on. Y'all said y'all been to jail. We should have answers from all of you. I want to show you something. They were mostly Black. right? Black. Right? Black. I ain't talking about the chaplain somebody hired. I'm talking about the inmates. Right? Right? So why can you lead in prison and there was other people, everybody's not black, even though it may be the majority a lot of times in the Islamic communities in the prison. Why can you lead in black, but when you get outside, you can't lead nothing? And do you know in prison, we build our own communities. We organize, we do services, we do programs, we do all the stuff. We do business, we do everything in the prison. And we run the prison. Muslims run the prison. How we get out here and we can't lead? What? How do we get out of here and all of a sudden you was on the minbar, you was in class, you was talking all that junk inside, and now you outside and you a slave? You can't even figure out what leadership smell like. Explain that to me. Explain that to me. So some of these guys in here, y'all don't know, some of these guys been in jail with me. They was in prison with me. I was the same way in prison. They'll tell you. They was in there with me. I was the same way in prison. The same way I'm now, that's how I was in prison. Same exact thing. Ain't nothing changed. Same stuff. Same pattern. Why we get out here and we servants? Tell me. I always look at brothers. I'm like, yo, what's up? This would have never happened in the side. What the hell are you doing? Huh? How did you get to this point? We were leaders, and you dare not try to run. I remember when they would hire chaplains, the prison, they would hire outside chaplain. We would go in the office, tell that chaplain, sit there and push that paper. You better not come try to teach nothing. Got us in a lot of trouble, but I'm just being honest, right? Got us in a lot of trouble. We would go into the chaplain's office. They hired this new Muslim chaplain. Man, you better stand there and push that pen. You're not coming out here saying nobody nothing. We run this. That was our attitude. We run this. You not go fill out paperwork. You not running nothing. I'm hired as the imam. You work for the prison. You don't work for us. Go do your prison job. You not running nothing. And we meant it. How do you go from that, which is a lot of us, to come out here and some guy who couldn't even survive in here is got you inferior? He couldn't even survive in the environment, and he's bossing you around. To make it make sense. He couldn't survive, yet he's bossing you around. Make it make sense. Doesn't make sense. And I'm only telling that story just to highlight the point, not to praise being in prison, not that at all. Because we were in prison because of the thought patterns we have in terms of not fighting our oppressors and letting them do social engineering on us. That's a whole nother story for a whole different topic. But I'm showing you, yes, we can. We did it. We can lead. We have the ability. We know how to survive in circumstances. Why we can't build our communities? Why can't we come together to establish leadership? We did it. We used to have shura boards and voting for the leader and who's going to be the imam, and when there was a takeover, how to handle that. And, we did all that stuff. You remember? Why we get out of here with all this freedom, we can't do nothing. With all these resources, we can't do nothing. And all of us been in the same situation. Don't make sense. We got to get rid of this self-hate. That's my long spiel on this. And I'm going to be articulating it more and more and more with documentation and books. And it's going to take me a while with this project I'm working on. But before I die, I want to leave a legacy. Specifically for my own children, but more in general for us as African American Muslims. I know I have a role to play, and so do all of you. And I'm just trying to do my part. The skill set that Allah gave me, I'm trying to use it for our upliftment, for our empowerment. That doesn't mean I'm against no one else. We all brothers. I wish we would act like brothers so we don't have to have these discussions. But that's not reality. And I'm not going to act like I'm not dealing with reality. I wish it was like that. I wish that we could just go to the table like everyone else, negotiate, and everyone's realized a benefit to uplift our nation, help your nation. We all work together and we make a better world. Man, that would be so ideal. And that's how the world works, except for Black folks. It don't work like that way for us. Every nation goes and works with other nations, and they put together and help and build, and they do that. That's why you got the United Nations. But for Black Americans, there's no nation for you. You have to build your own nation. And one of the mistakes that we've made, we leaving out our people. We became Muslim and not Black anymore. And our mindset. So therefore, we disconnected from a resource that could help us collectively move together. Because the Black man problem in general is the Black Muslims problem as well. Whatever problem Black people got, Black Americans got, Black Muslim Americans got that same problem. And it ain't because they said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, their reality changed. You got the same problem, homie. That's why you ain't got no chandeliers in your masjid. While all your brothers got chandeliers and ground up masjids, you don't. You don't. So much for all that brotherhood when it comes to you. So, but if you don't realize that, I don't know what to tell you. But what I tell you, don't become like them in their practice. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should ever change your circumstance, don't become an oppressor. Don't become unjust. That thing we stand against, don't you ever become it. Keep that in mind, because the tables will turn. Even if we don't live to see it, the tables will turn. That's the sunnah of Allah and His creation. The tables will turn. We will rise as a people. Maybe we may not be here. Maybe we will. But whenever we do rise, if we happen to be here and make it a bequest for your children, don't become like the oppressors. Don't become like the oppressors. When it's your turn, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates you to the status of Waliul Amr, Wulatul Amr, don't become like those people you complained about. Don't become unjust. So we must teach ourselves and our children and our offspring and prepare them for leadership, world leadership, not the storefront, world leadership. Prepare them. Have that conversation. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of your own potential. We are a talented people. We are a blessed people. That's why we stay in so much struggle. Allah is purifying us through our struggle. And access is being granted. We just got to stay the course. We got to stay the course. Access is granted. We just got to stay the course and continue the struggle. That's where we take that saying, jahid to shahid. It's fine. All right, y'all. I beat y'all up for 2 hours. I meant to. I really would like to beat us up for 12 hours, but I know we can't stand it. But so I'll be merciful to all of us, including myself. We got work to do. We have work to do. Seriously. And it ain't enough of us that have the courage to do the work, to even speak about it. Because we're afraid of our risk. We're afraid of our sustenance. If I talk too much, I'm going to lose my money. Allah has all of the possessions of the heavens and the earth. No one can take nothing from you or give you anything except that Allah willed that for you eternally. That's why Aqeedah is important. So that shouldn't stop you. No one's going to take anything that Allah wished for you to have. And no one's going to give you anything that Allah didn't will for you to have. So don't let that stop you. And for us, brothers and sisters who've been in prison, this is a gift from Allah to you. The fact you've been in prison, that's a gift. That's a gift from Allah to you. You know why? Because they took everything from you already. You know what it feels like to have nothing. So they can't take what you already seen taken before. You know that Allah will restore because you're out and you're doing stuff and you're building. So Allah did restore you, so you know it, right? So don't be afraid. The same one who restored you, if someone tried to take it, he could give it back to you again. You remember those days? Sometimes you were standing in the mail line waiting for a letter and it didn't come, waiting for a money order that didn't come. You remember those days? We've had them. If you did enough time, you've had those days. That was a training for you to show you to rely on your Lord, to trust in your Lord. That was a training for you. Did you learn? That was your boot camp. Now you're a soldier on the battlefield. Go do your work. That was your boot camp. That was your training for real life, real battle, real building. Go do it. Barakallahu bikum wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I remind you tomorrow for the Black Imams Roundtable at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow is going to be a very important roundtable. We're going to have some heavy discussion tomorrow. So keep that in mind. And I also remind you, February the 3rd and the 4th for the narration and explanation with the unbroken chain to the great Imam An-Nawawi and his Arba'in, his 40 hadith at Masjid Muhammad in Atlantic City, February 3rd, 4th, Saturday and Sunday, from 10 a.m. to 6 a.m. Inshallah, I'll remind you, the flyer is on Masjid Muhammad's page on Facebook. It's on my own personal Amin Muhammad Facebook page. Please, other people have shared it. Take that flyer and share it so that people would know. Inshallah. The 4th, 6 o'clock. So from 10 to 6, because we have to complete the book with explanation and chains. And we have an elder sheikh that's going to be with us. So we need all our time because sheikh is over 70 something years old and it's going to take time, you know. So we got to read, we have to explain. We're going to get some Sufism Jews from the sheikh, you know, so it's going to be a lot. So you have to be there at 10 and hopefully we can finish each night at 6. Some of it will be broadcasted. The sheikh doesn't want to be put out there much, so I have to ask his permission. So we will broadcast something. I don't know if he will permit that we do everything. Some people just don't like the cameras, and he's one of them. But he's from our own sheikhs. He's from our own. He's from our own. He was doing this when we weren't even born. Subhanallah. One day, if I can get him to get out the shadows to tell us his story and the history, oh my goodness. I know it. I mean, I've been with him for years. We have a unique experience and journey, man, as a people. And we have some Jews in our own community that we need to learn to highlight. And I've been pushing for this issue. So it is a pleasure, inshallah. So you'll see. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You're going to wait till you get there. You wouldn't know him if I told you anyway. Only a few people would know him. But when you get there, you will enjoy. Inshallah. So Friday, February the 3rd. No Friday. February the 3rd, Saturday. February the 4th is Sunday. Am I correct? Yes. Friday's Jumu'ah regular, but yeah, the 3rd and the 4th, right? That's the program from 10 to 6. I would say get here Friday so you can be available 10 a.m. in the morning. Barakallahu bikum. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. No Super Bowl for you. I don't know. Maybe we let the people watch the Super Bowl in the community room. That's a good time to do it because Super Bowl is later, after class. I didn't know that was Super Bowl weekend. Don't care anyway, but some people do. So maybe that would be a good time for people to enjoy themselves. Oh, the Super Bowl is the 11th. Oh, that guy don't know what he's talking about. We can still do it. All right. Barakallahu bikum. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.